Hello, everyone. Welcome to this section on fifth-generation warfare and its impact on cybersecurity. My name is Bob Jamieson. I'm currently the CEO of CSM International. I'm also a former active duty officer in the United States Marine Corps, specializing in information technology and cybersecurity. And I have a doctorate in psychology and behavioral science. The purpose of this session is to provide you with a background on what fifth-generation warfare is, how it impacts you, and how you can operate in this environment. Although warfare is as old as mankind, we began describing the generations of warfare based upon the Westphalia Convention, which was signed in 1648 at the end of the 30-year war in Europe. Before that, wars could be fought by anyone who had money or charisma to raise an army and was not the exclusive domain of a government or a country. After the convention was signed, any non-state actor that was engaged in warfare was called an outlaw or a mercenary and was labeled as a brigand. Wars before this also included asymmetric tactics. However, after the adoption of this and further treaties, could only be conducted by uniformed personnel under the control of a designated representative of the government. So first-generation warfare is characterized by opposing forces raised by a recognized government. The combatants are in uniform, or at a minimum have the insignia of the country they represent, and are under the command of an appropriate representative of the government. Although rifles and cannon are used, the weapons are not very accurate at a distance. The battle is conducted by a formation of men marching towards their opponent, and then rushing forward to engage in hand-to-hand combat. The winner is determined by the side that has the most people left at the end of the battle, or, if the other side retreats from the battle, then the winner is the one that stands on the ground. During this period, there was very limited use of information warfare due to the limitations from mass communications. Second-generation warfare is the beginning of industrialized war. Weapons are far more accurate at a distance and far more deadly. Some motorized components are available, such as tanks and aircraft. Interestingly, at the beginning of this phase, the tactics, that is, the tactics with people, didn't keep up with the advance of weapons capability, and there were many millions of casualties as a result of generals using massed formations of first-generation war against the modern weapons of second generation. This is going to be a recurring theme. Generals are always fighting the last war, not the next war, and therefore their lack of adaptation results in extensive harm to both their military and their civilian populations. Second-generation warfare culminated in World War I, and due to changes in communication, saw an increase in the use of propaganda using loudspeakers, leaflets, print media, and other emerging resources. Third-generation warfare is known as maneuver warfare using combined arms. The accuracy of weapons has greatly increased, as well as the mobility of the forces. We saw the introduction of this generation warfare in World War II by the Germans in Europe and Africa, where they would rapidly maneuver around fixed defenses and gain victory by attacking their opponent's flanks, rear, and supply lines. Weapons are significantly more accurate, which creates battlefield conditions where small, dispersed units with distributed decision-making ability are more effective than large, centrally controlled formations. Information warfare has become more sophisticated and important to the war effort, with countries not only trying to influence their opponents, but also their own populations using new forms of mass communications. We also have the beginning of the use of psychological operations by businesses to manipulate customers' buying behaviors. By the end of World War II, we saw yet another evolution in warfare where nations with inferior armed forces began using decentralized warfare tactics to overcome their opponent's military forces through hit and run and guerrilla tactics. This involved non-uniformed personnel who focused on quick, unexpected attacks to distribute and demoralize their opponent while simultaneously mounting propaganda and information campaigns against civilian and military populations. The non-uniformed forces were backed up by regular military combatants for critical battles once the irregular forces had sufficiently weakened their opponents. A great example of this generation warfare is the Vietnam War, where a blend of political, information, propaganda, and asymmetric warfare defeated a far superior force. The use of information warfare has continued to grow for both geopolitical purposes by governments and strategic objectives by businesses. The preceding evolutions of warfare get us to our current generation of war, where battle for the mind is as important, if not more so, than the battles taking place between combatant forces. With the explosion of communication channels over the past 3 decades, specifically the exponential use of the internet, not only for communications, but also for control systems that support our civilization, we are all becoming combatants. Information warfare is being conducted by governments via mainstream media to try to control the narrative, while at the same time, non-mainstream media sources can provide clearer understanding of the issues or completely distort the issues to play on our emotions. We have additionally blurred the line between cyber and physical worlds. Our banking systems are all in cyberspace, as is our power grids, air traffic control systems, telephone communications, and almost every other aspect of our modern life. This means that an attack on any one of those systems can significantly damage or destroy a nation. Fifth generation warfare, information warfare, uses very distinct tactics to achieve outcomes. As I mentioned previously, you can see all of these tactics in business advertising today. But they're also extensively used by nation states via mainstream media to manipulate their own and other populations. In the next few slides, I'll provide some examples. However, just from the names and descriptions, I'm sure you can all think of some very recent examples in which each of these were found in commercial advertising. What we don't consider as a population, because they've become so pervasive, is that this is happening to us every day, every hour, by both governments and businesses via all the media outlets that they control. The purpose of the tactics we just discussed is to achieve dominance either on the fifth generation warfare battlefield or in business. And actually, these are becoming the same space. Many of the large global companies are also part of the military-industrial complex, and many times their business goals intersect with the political and military goals of the country where they operate. You'll also notice that the phases of information warfare are very, very similar to what are used for the cyber kill chain. We move from preparation to infiltration to attack, then exploit, then escalate, and then we continue to exploit and attack after we have a strong foothold inside of the mind of the enemy. Although information warfare and cyber warfare are deeply interlinked, there are some differences in outcomes. The information war is to manipulate your mind, whereas cyber war is to control or destroy your systems, or is a complement to kinetic operations. So our phases are similar in that the attacker will begin by a reconnaissance activity that will eventually evolve into an attack. And as the attacks intensify, they will also include zero-day and other types of malicious software that can set up kinetic outcomes. In phase 3, deception is the key, especially when linked to an information warfare campaign to create a false flag event. A theoretical example of a false flag event could be an event where a country may be aware of a pending attack, allow the attack to happen, which causes death and casualties to its population, and then it's followed by information war to demonize the attackers so that the nation could commit genocide. Lastly, an increasing objective of cyber war is creating kinetic outcomes where real war damage is achieved. Now that we have a good definition of fifth generation warfare in the context of the evolution of war, I'd like us to spend some time talking about how we can combat its various aspects and especially focus on what we can do as cybersecurity professionals. Ed Bernays is considered the godfather of propaganda. He not only worked for the CIA, but also worked for advertisers. His focus was to manipulate the minds of the population. His tactics are so ingrained in business and government today that all messages have become a form of manipulation and control. We are literally being bombarded by these messages on a 24/7 basis. So our first step is to understand that this is a fact of our existence. And our first defense is to question everything. Consider that anything that you're being told from any source has an agenda that is not necessarily in your best interest, and then try to find as many other opposing sources so you can get to something like the truth. So here are two examples of information war. The first one is really about us in the tech industry. We have been bombarded by information warfare campaign that says the cloud is cheaper, better, and faster. But is it? A quick survey of any application that has been moved to the cloud will indicate that it is at least 100 to 500% more expensive to us, or said differently, 100 to 500% more profitable to the cloud providers than it was before it moved to the cloud. Not only that, but the message to the CIOs has been you don't need an IT staff or a security staff when you move to the cloud. Of course, in the fine print, it says you do need to do it yourself, but nobody really reads the fine print. Another thing when you think about the cloud is looking at the breaches. Over the past many years, you'll see far more breaches, far more successful breaches, far larger breaches from cloud properties than from anything on-prem. If you look at the breaches in the link, you'll see a graphic presentation of what those breaches look like over the years. Another example of information warfare that is kind of current, given that it's 2 days after November 22nd, which is the 60th anniversary of President Kennedy's, U.S. President Kennedy's assassination in the U.S. That assassination, anybody questioning that assassination was labeled as a conspiracy theorist by the CIA. They did a name-calling campaign against it. But just lately, just this year, over the last couple of years, we're starting to get more and more evidence that it was a conspiracy and that there were many more people involved. That name-calling campaign, though, kept it successfully suppressed for at least 60 years. In the cyber war space, we have numerous examples. However, the most recent ones are more concerning, are becoming more concerning, due to the combination with kinetic attacks. As the first one indicated, it was a phase 4 on a power grid. So the intent of this attack was to do a cyber attack first, knocking out power systems, and then follow with a missile attack. If you tie this to a movement to the cloud, an attack of this nature, where you attack the power grid and thereby the communications grid before launching a massive missile attack, could completely destroy a nation's electrical grid and communication systems. At a larger scale, it could throw an entire population to the Stone Age, creating untold death and misery to people for an entire geographical region. And then if you can couple that with the other attacks that we're seeing, a phase 2 attack against tech professionals in the Middle East, for instance, you could disable the tech workers from being able to respond, which would make a recovery of this type of attack impossible. So like the preceding generations of warfare, we need to approach 5th generation warfare with a different mindset than those of the last generation of the wars that we have fought. This requires that we don't fall into mental traps. We don't buy into information warfare deceptions. We approach cybersecurity with aggressiveness and flexibility and proactivity. Keep in mind, it's not about the tools. Tools, sold by people. The objective of the tools, the objective of somebody selling cybersecurity products is to sell their products, not necessarily to solve your specific issues, but it's to sell their stuff whether it works or not. Our job is to understand what we need, understand those needs, and apply not just tools, but human capabilities towards solving those needs. So the result of this change in our recommended approach to combat fifth generation warfare is to be actively engaged in your defense, and in fact, engage in offensive countermeasures by developing a strategy that is completely tailored to your organization. So we always start with the basics. Our first area is to manage our infrastructure. Know 100% of your assets. Know what is your assets and what isn't your assets. Patch and have controls on the infrastructure and applications. Segment the environment. Monitor its health and create extensive access controls that not only apply to the users but also to the devices. Use zero trust concepts in your design. And by the way, zero trust is not a technology as much as suppliers would like to make you believe it is. Zero trust is a concept, and I recommend that you use the NIST 800-207 to help start on your journey. There's no magic bullets here. It's just hard work and diligence. However, this is the baseline, the foundation for all the other aspects of your defense. Your culture is key to effectively winning on this battlefield. Getting all personnel in your organization aligned to recognize when they are being phished starts with training programs talking about information warfare altogether and phishing specifically. As a human society, we are far more trusting than is appropriate to the evolution of warfare in our societies, and we as cybersecurity and fifth generation warfare experts have to be the forefront on helping people understand the change. We also have to engage with our user community to become trusted advisors when they have questions. In addition to making sure that we have a strategy and architecture, we must make sure that we're compliant with any regulation that is appropriate to our industry. And lastly, we must learn faster than the attackers. We must develop internal training and education programs for the cybersecurity experts to understand how the attackers are changing and then modify our defenses to be ahead of the evolution of the attackers. Lastly, active defense or offensive countermeasures includes monitoring both internally and externally. It's about knowing who is attacking you and from where. It's about knowing your environment and having your tripwires to alert you when somebody gets in. Active defense is also going beyond your perimeter and gathering intelligence on attackers and about your weaknesses. We recommend that you use red team activity. This allows you to model your responses in regular tabletop exercises to how your red team got into your system and how your red team sees you as a potential attacker. And this also allows you to modify your response playbooks accordingly. Fifth generation warfare is not the end of the evolution of warfare. We will, in the very near future, experience the next phase with artificial general intelligence. Our job then is to remain ever knowledgeable on the events around us and constantly learn so we can adapt to the next evolution. I know that this has been a lot of information in a very short period of time, and I appreciate your attention during this session. I apologize that I'm not there in person to answer your questions, but please feel free to reach out to contact us on our website, and we will be very happy to engage with you. Thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of your conference.